and welcome to the very first episode of The Wool Exchange, the podcast from Australian Wool Exchange, better known as AWSS. I'm your host, Sarah Clark, and in each episode we'll be exploring the issues and subjects that are critical to the integrity, transparency, sustainability and efficiency of Australia's wool selling system. So if wool's important to you, whether as a grower, shearer, classer, broker, buyer, processor or consumer brand, this podcast is for you. In this episode of The Wool Exchange, we explore the Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme. It's a scheme that certifies wool growers' on-farm sustainability practices and outcomes and leverages industry innovations to support traceability through to first stage processing. We also discuss what the Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme is, what it does, and how it's boosting the brand of Australian wool. In this conversation, we'll explore the increasing domestic and global demand for transparency around the origins of wool and how a sustainably certified product adds value. Joining us are the key players from the producers, processors, exporters, selling agents and members of the Australian Wool Exchange. But here with me now for the ride is Bridie Cray. She's the Sustainability and Integrity Manager from the Australian Wool Exchange. Hi, Bridie.
Hi, Sarah.
Tell me, who are you, what do you do and about your role?
I've been a wool grower my whole life, originally from Western Australia, and we still have merino flocks down on our farms there, so I'm still very connected to that. But I joined the Australian Wool Exchange to work with them in relaunching the Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme and working with growers and brokers and the rest of the supply chain.
Let's start at the beginning then, Bridie. What is the AWSS? Is it a sustainability certification scheme for Australian wool growers?
The Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme is a sustainability certification designed specifically for Australian wool growers to demonstrate how they meet high standards in sustainability, animal welfare and environmental care. Importantly, the certification also focuses on caring for people, community and care for industry. These are really important parts of sustainability and at times not as focused on as care for animals or environment. For Australian wool growers, being certified by AWSS shows that their practices align with sustainability goals that not only meet market expectations, but also secure the health of their land, animals and operations long term. It builds confidence throughout the supply chain, giving buyers and consumers a clear signal that the wool they purchase has been produced to high sustainability standards.
And looking at the wool supply chain, how important is it that there is this certification scenario?
It's becoming more and more crucial in a lot of supply chains, including the wool one. So over the past, we've seen it be really a consumer-driven space where they're demanding transparency in the origins of the products that they're purchasing, and they want to know that they've been produced responsibly. However, in recent years, we've actually started to see the space move from being that consumer interest-driven space to one that's increasingly regulated. There's a lot of new regulations and frameworks that are being developed and rolled out globally that directly impact how companies report their commitments to meeting things like climate change targets and how they evidence their sustainability claims when they're marketing a product based on that. A key one that we think will have significant impact on Australian wool growers is the EU Greens Claims Directive. So this addresses the issue of greenwashing by companies, and it'll regulate how a company will need to evidence the claims that they're making on a product being sustainable. For wool products being sold into these markets, it's critical that a brand has the confidence in the sustainability credentials of the wool they produce, and this needs to be credibly evidenced all the way back to the on-farm practices of the wool grower. We've actually already seen some major brands using wool commit to having 100% certified supply chains within the next 5 years. So a certification like AWSS doesn't just verify sustainable practices, it adds tangible value to the wool by distinguishing it in the market and opening access to global markets that are increasingly prioritising sustainable fibres.
And AWSS, it's an Australian-owned scheme created for an Australian environment. Why is that important then for Australia to have its own scheme?
AWSS was built with a clear understanding of Australia's unique climate, biodiversity and farming practices. So rather than adapting international standards that may not reflect our local conditions, or they might hold Australian growers to a different standard than those in other countries that don't have access to the same animal and environmental tools that we have. We thought that it was really important that we keep our framework very close to what's going on in the Australian industry. So AWSS allows wool growers to demonstrate their sustainability in a way that's practical and realistic for their environment. And it fairly represents Australian growers globally in terms of their commitment and investment into sustainability. So we wanted to make sure our standards reflected that and recognised the great work that Australian wool growers already do in this space.
Well, this might be a good time to bring in our wool producers. I spoke to Jo Hall, who's the CEO of Wool Producers Australia. Jo Hall, thanks very much for joining this podcast. Now, does Australia need its own sustainability certification like AWSS?
Yes, it does. I mean, when you think about it, Australia has unique production, geographical and climatic conditions. So how we produce wool in Australia differs significantly from other production countries. All of the QA systems that exist in the marketplace for wool are based on other countries' production systems, such as, for example, the Northern Hemisphere type countries, or just are generic in nature. So it makes a lot of sense to have an Australian sustainability certification scheme.
Animal wellbeing on farm, it's a key part of the 5 pillars of the scheme. How crucial then is caring for the animal on farm and in the process of wool production?
Animal welfare and well-being is the number one priority of Australian wool growers. Healthy, well-cared for animals are profitable animals. And while some people might shy away from bringing in economic factors into the conversation when discussing animal welfare, the reality is that when we are talking about sustainability, profitability and receiving economic gains underpins all business decisions.
And the scheme is inclusive of growers that mules with appropriate pain relief. Is this important for the industry?
We know in Australia that mulesing is not a black and white issue or a binary issue where mulesing could be seen as bad animal welfare and non-mulesing is good animal welfare, because we know that there are some sheep in Australia and many sheep in Australia where mulesing with pain relief, when that's done to them, it's the single biggest animal welfare intervention that we as producers can undertake for whole of life animal welfare outcomes for those animals. So no other QA system allows for mulesing. So again, this goes back to the AWSS being really relevant to Australian production.
And a certification system for wool that's been grown sustainably, is this a positive for the industry?
This is a huge positive for the Australian industry. Sustainability is such a major factor for our customers, and if we're going to continue providing what our customers are seeking, we have to prove it, which is where the AWSS comes into it. It provides that basis to back up our claims as producers around our sustainability credentials.
And quality clip preparation, it's a key aspect of the AWSS scheme. How does this benefit the wool grower?
Australia has a great reputation globally for the quality of our wool. And again, as Australian producers, we know that what we do and how we do things is world leading. But again, having this QA system to prove what we're claiming is another benefit to Australian growers. So quality counts, our customers demand it. Again, this is a way of proving that to our customers and demonstrating what we do.
That was Jo Hall from Wool Producers Australia. Bridie, you're AWS's Sustainability and Integrity Manager, and you know all the ins and outs of AWSS. How big a role does technology play when it comes to traceability and integrity?
We're really lucky in the Australian wool industry around some of the technology that's been developed that really feeds into that traceability and integrity story. And AWS has actually been at the forefront of developing a lot of this. So we've been able to leverage the fantastic innovations that are already available to wool growers. We have what we call e-bales, which are wool packs that have a unique identification code that can be read through either an RFID or a QR code. And that allows us to identify individual bales and trace them through the supply chain. We also have WoolClip, which is an online platform that allows wool growers and classes to create a digital specification of the wool, which can then also transfer the data through the supply chain. So by using these in combination, growers who are certified by AWSS can trace their wool all the way through to first stage processing. It allows for buyers to have confidence that the wool that they're purchasing meets AWSS standards, and it creates the efficiencies for that data transfer from grower, broker, exporter and processor.
There are 5 pillars that are the foundation of AWSS. What are they?
The 5 foundational pillars include caring for environment, caring for sheep, caring for people, communities and customers, and caring for industry. And our 5th one is around that quality and integrity. So each of the pillars represent a commitment to holistic sustainability across a business and industry, ensuring that animal wellbeing is prioritised, the environment is preserved and managed, people involved in the wool industry are treated fairly and supported to stay and further their careers in the industry, and that businesses and industry remain financially viable.
Sustainability, it can seem ever-changing. How is AWSS dealing with this?
Sustainability is such a dynamic field, and it's really, really interesting when you look at it from a global picture and across other industries, and that we're still really developing what this space means and what it looks like for each individual industry or person. We really recognise the importance of that aspect of it always changing, and that we need to be able to leverage advice from experts on the nature of sustainability and how this comes into play in the wool industry. So part of AWSS was appointing a dedicated independent expert panel that allows us to get advice from them to keep our standards relevant and aligned with global sustainability principles.
I spoke to AWSS CEO Mark Grave, who's been instrumental in shaping AWSS over the past 2 decades. With 21 years of dedicated service as CEO, Mark's vision has left a lasting legacy across the wool industry, from wool classing to traceability innovations and sustainability certification. I asked him about how important it is for Australia to have its own sustainability certification scheme.
I think for the Australian wool industry, it's critical. We're the largest apparel wool producer in the world. We have every country wanting to buy our wool. To have a certification scheme that actually understands the Australian landscape and environment and also meets the needs of our customers is vital to the future success of the industry.
And looking at AWSS, the Sustainability Certification Scheme, why is responsible part of this?
It's about recognising the Australian landscape and environment in which we live and work. And we know that in excess of 45% of Australian wool growers still need to perform mulesing with pain relief, effective pain relief, as part of their operation until such a time as they're able to transition to a non-mules flock. Now, for us, that means that they shouldn't be forgotten. They need to be recognised. And what they are doing towards sustainability on their properties and their enterprises is equal to any, and we want to make sure that they are recognised as part of the scheme and part of the transition for the industry.
And what is the key to sustainability for the industry as a whole?
Well, firstly, to recognise that it's actually becoming and is probably now a very real issue for buyers making their purchasing decisions. Sustainability for the wool industry back 50 years ago was about quality, and quality meant that it was a well-prepared, well-bred wool that was being put for offer for any Australian buyer of Australian wool. Today that's evolved, and it's evolving quickly into more than just about the quality of the fibre itself, and making sure that there's independent certification of the qualities and the benefits that the customers are looking for.
That was the CEO of AWSS, Mark Grave. Now, another key party in the wool industry supply chain is the selling agent. Rowan Woods is the president of the National Council of Wool Selling Brokers of Australia. I spoke to him about how valuable it is for his grower clients to have a sustainability certification that's fit for purpose for Australian conditions.
Everyone realises that the modern world requires some level of guarantee of product, or certification as we now call it. Consumers want to know from where the product, and in our case the garment, they are buying originates. Where was the raw material produced? How was it produced? And how was it damaging to the environment in that process? So for the wool industry in Australia, most certifications are imposed on us from a long way downstream with some level of lack of regard for operational factors here. So to have a certification process designed from the production level up makes compliance from a grower's perspective easy to understand and therefore more achievable. This is what we do and we stand by it, rather than this is what you have to do, whether it's possible or not.
And what are the benefits to brokers and wool growers of digitally enabled traceability from wool clip and e-bale?
Well, the speed and elimination of errors are the key. Errors which occur in the shearing shed, such as misdescribed bales, cost brokers time and therefore money. If you carry that forward into a traceability mindset, you just can't have errors. eBale and wool clip eliminate the errors before the wool even leaves the shed. You simply can't double up a bale number, for example. The system just won't let you do it. And the need to trace wool quickly and, most importantly, accurately is paramount.
The Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme does not require brokers to undertake internal audits. How is this a benefit then to brokers?
With other certification schemes, Sarah, the broker's the one doing the internal audits. It's costly, it's laborious, and it's mostly well outside the scope of services usually provided by a broker. On top of that, the complexities of the reporting process are difficult to manage. The producer's the one making the commitment. It's their reputation at stake. They want to get it right, and most, if not all, internal audits are simply a repeat of the last. Most things don't change from year to year, and for the few that do, well, let the grower declare them. Let the grower be the one to announce any changes they've made to their production methodology.
That was Rowan Woods, the President of the National Council of Wool Selling Brokers of Australia. Let's look at the demands of the international market and the increasing demand for sustainably certified supply chains and transparency around the origins of the product and the importance of digital traceability. Joshua Lamb is the President of the Australian Council of Wool Exporters and Processors.
There certainly is an increase in demand for sustainably certified wool. I think that's a trend that's increasing across a very wide range of products, but in wool in particular, we're seeing it pick up pace the last few years.
And is this being driven by the consumer who wants to know the wool they're purchasing has been sustainably produced, or is this driven by changing regulations?
I think it's a little bit of both. There's certainly a provenance aspect to it, which consumers seem to be more and more attuned to with a lot of products they buy. There is a regulation aspect to it, but it's probably more the threat of that regulation in the future, particularly around animal welfare issues where manufacturers certainly want to get ahead of the curve.
And are some customers committing to 100% certified supply chains, and when is this happening?
I think customers of Australian wool have been moving down this path for probably the last 10 years. It has picked up pace post-COVID. In the wool industry, we can't supply a 100% certified supply chain in large volumes at the moment until we have more certified wool on the market. But certainly in small volumes, that's possible, and some brands have a circular business model and others are more vertical. So it's definitely demands there. We just need to be able to satisfy that demand.
And noting your role overseeing the export market, what's the feedback from international buyers when it comes to purchasing a sustainably certified product?
The feedback, apart from the point they are asking for it increasingly, what they're looking for is a product that's ethically produced, it's sustainable, needs to be traceable, obviously, with integrity, it needs to be transparent. And increasingly what we're seeing in probably over the last 12 to 18 months, there's more emphasis on a quality component to that product as well.
And so a scheme like AWSS, does it provide assurances to the global supply chain on the integrity and quality of Australia's sustainably grown wool?
It absolutely does, and the Australian industry is very confident that the AWSS can provide that data to back up the integrity of that chain. But also there's an element to the quality side of the AWSS which other schemes don't possess at the moment, and that's very important.
Joshua Lamb, thanks for joining the Wool Exchange podcast.
Thanks, Sarah.
Quality clip preparation is also an important aspect of AWSS to meet the needs of the customers. David Michelle is the Executive Director and owner of Michelle Wool. It's one of Australia's oldest and largest exporters of Australian wool fibre and has been associated with the international wool textile industry for more than 150 years.
Well, as a processor, the main thing that we are doing is effectively making a known outcome from a vast array of various inputs. So if we don't know what's in a bale of wool, then the likelihood of me making a very technical end product for my customer is close to zero. So it's right up there in terms of the major important things in life.
And how is demand for sustainable certified wool changing?
It's increasing. So today I could sell significant volumes of certified wool if it were available. The challenge for us is that we specialise in the shorter part of the clip, and certified cardings are like hen's teeth, very hard to find, and that's actually impacting on my business. So I would encourage anybody who thinks that wool is a good place to be carving a career. More than just a trend, is actually now a real issue in the whole textile chain.
How is demand then for sustainable certified wool changing? And again, who's driving this change?
Well, the drive is coming definitely from social media, so it's alive and well and ever changing. That makes it rather difficult for most people because the moods change too quickly. However, the retailers have all picked up on the need to show provenance of how their products are made and where it comes from, and that is resulting in the need for a certified stamp on everything.
David Michelle, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
Righty, as David Michelle noted, consumers and as a result retailers are increasingly wanting a certified stamp on products, and in this case wool. Describe what makes AWSS different to other certification schemes.
So we've touched on a few things that makes our scheme different. We're about the only sustainability certification scheme in wool that uses the PIC as the identifier for that certification. We thought that that was really important, not only, as I've said, because it aligns with the rest of industry and provides that greater traceability, but it gives really high confidence that the practices we're certifying are happening on that property. Another thing that sets us apart is that we have 2 certification options under the Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme. So we have Sustainable, which certifies wool from growers that are non-mulesed or have ceased mulesing. And that really caters to those buyers that have made commitments around purchasing only non-mulesed wool and want sustainability certification. But we also have an option for growers that continue to mulese with appropriate pain relief as part of their essential fly strike management plan. This is our certification Responsible. We thought that it's really important to include an option for the more than 40% of wool growers in Australia that still mulese with appropriate pain relief, because we believe that they already still demonstrating great sustainability practices on farm, including considering whole of life animal wellbeing.
Angela Schuster has been involved in the development of agricultural certification schemes in Australia and internationally for around 2 decades. She runs Schuster Consulting and is an AWSS panel member and chairs expert committees for Standards Australia. I spoke to her about the rising interest and the importance of certification across all agricultural industries.
Certification is becoming increasingly important across agriculture, but it's not a one-size-fits-all journey. Some industries like wool and seafood have had certification schemes in place for years and are at more mature stages. Others are just starting to explore the path towards certification. There's also this distinction between private certification schemes and industry-led assurance initiatives. While they're not technically certifications, they achieve a similar outcome, and some industries have had these for years as well, like the Livestock Production Assurance Program in the livestock sector. What is evident, though, is the growing interest in certification across the board from our markets, but it is being approached thoughtfully. Markets want greater assurances about the claims that are being made and how these claims are being verified.
And why is there an increasing need for certification for industries like the Australian wool industry?
It's really coming from evolving market and societal expectations. So for the Australian wool industry in particular, animal welfare has been a key focus of any claims for the last couple of decades. And certification schemes have played an important role in addressing these concerns and ensuring best practices are followed. In more recent years, though, what we're seeing is the scope is broadening to include the far larger topic of sustainability, which animal welfare is one topic under that umbrella, if you like. But what we find, though, of course, is that sustainability varies depending on the market. So the meaning of the word can vary quite significantly market to market. For example, in the EU, there's significant emphasis on emissions and deforestation, while our Southeast Asian markets prioritise things like food safety and continuity of supply under that sustainability umbrella. For wool, demonstrating alignment with such a diverse definition of sustainability and the expectations around sustainability is really critical to maintaining and growing market access, but it's also a challenge to get that alignment right as well. So international markets are increasingly expecting robust evidence to back certification claims. So it's no longer a matter of, I'm saying this, trust me, I mean what I say. They actually want an example where I am saying this and somebody else can verify that what I am saying is true.
How important is it that certification schemes like the AWSS align with industry frameworks, such as the Sheep Sustainability Framework and the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework?
Alignment is critical. Industry frameworks like the Sheep Sustainability Framework and the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework provide a broad vision for sustainability, if you like. Certification schemes like the AWSS translate that vision into actionable practices at the ground level.
That was Angela Schuster. Speaking of the Australian Sheep Sustainability Framework, I also spoke to Scott Williams, who's the chair of their advisory group and is an AWSS expert panel member. Scott Williams, thanks for joining the Wool Exchange podcast. Now, what's the value of ASSF for industry?
I often like to say that the sustainability framework allows us as an industry to map the territory of sustainability. It allows us as an industry and as a country to say these are the issues that are material to us.
So therefore, what's the benefit then of AWSS aligning with SSF?
Well, I think it's really important if we're sitting down and identifying the right sustainability issues to address, then it follows that we should be measuring the same sorts of metrics. I think as much as anything, it's really important that we remember that all of this sort of stuff puts an onus on growers. They're being asked all the time to collect more data, particularly growers who are in a multi-enterprise situation. So they might be running sheep, they might be cropping, might be running cattle as well. Each of those industries are coming at sustainability from a slightly different angle and may have quite different sorts of data requirements. We need, at the very least within the sheep industry, to be all collecting the same data, the same metrics, so that it minimises the impost on growers and gives us the best possible data set to present to our stakeholders.
Scott Williams, thank you very much for joining the Wool Exchange podcast.
No problem, Sarah.
Bridie, we've covered all aspects of the AWSS, its importance across the wool industry for all sectors. Let's talk about cost. What is the cost to growers of being certified?
AWSS certification is designed to be accessible and cost-effective for Australian wool growers. Certification comes in at a cost of $750 plus GST per pick. We do offer a discount for growers that are interested in having additional picks certified under a single business.
And as a grower, what do I need to do to get certified?
So as a wool grower, if you're interested in being certified with AWSS, you should definitely visit our website at australianwoolsustainability.com.au. From there, you'll be able to find all of the details on our standards, the requirements to sell your wool, and you'll be able to find the online application. If you're unsure if you would qualify for certification, we encourage you to either still apply or contact us and we can talk you through whether you'd be eligible. Once your AWSS certification has been confirmed, growers should notify their broker to ensure they can correctly declare their certification when preparing their wool for sale. And to sell your wool as AWSS certified, you need to make sure you meet our integrity requirements. So that includes using wool packs with the RFID and QR code, or e-bales as we call them, scanning your e-bale into WoolClip and completing your specification through WoolClip, having your wool prepared by a registered wool classer to the Code of Practice, and completing the NWD, ensuring that this meets the requirement of your AWSS certification, so whether you're a sustainable or responsible grower.
Bridie Cray, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. And as Bridie said, if you'd like to find out more about the Australian Wool Sustainability Scheme, go to australianwoolsustainability.com.au. I'm Sarah Clark. Thanks for listening.